any questions about the session? There's no presentation. There's just us and microphones and you guys asking questions or throwing out sort of challenges or queries. And you can't give us something that takes like 5 days to solve, because we aren't going to do that.
Hard questions go to them, easy questions to me.
Yeah. And we have mics here.
What
Okay.
is the best way to prepare for the CBA exam?
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. We have a few bullets on that. One is, if you're not a guild member, join, right? There is a study guide on the guild website. It points you to different either parts of the BizBox or white papers. We'll have to go through and make sure that's updated because things keep happening. Or webinars that are out there that you can watch and listen to. But I think the most important thing is become familiar with the BizBox guide. We've heard a few recommendations this week about reading the meta model guide. It is not a technical paper, and it does provide a synopsis on how all the pieces fit together. So that is sort of a super condensed version of the BizBox. Other ways to do it, right, are, practice for a while and then go back and reread sections of the BizBox, participate in teams, or go to the Guild Accredited Training Partner page and look up a training partner of your choice and sort of go out and look at their websites and see what they're doing. And then you can, do you need one of our microphones? Okay, go out there and see if that would help you. Some people, everybody learns differently, right? So some people can sit down. There have been people who actually have sat down and read the BizBox and passed the exam. You can do that, but it is painful. I will tell you that now. It is a reference guide, right? It's like reading an encyclopedia. So you can do that, but I do recommend trying to look at a lot of other things, study guide, or, you can go get the training. The training is going to help you in your practice, which is important. So it's not just, you don't want to take a training course just to pass a CBA exam. Some people do. I'm not discounting those folks. But and the flip side of it is, if you're a business architect, you want to learn how to practice. Did you want to add some things there?
Yeah, test. Okay, good.
All
Principles, guidelines, definitely read those in the BizBox guide. I was going to say some other stuff that I'm forgetting. Scenarios, definitely consume as much around scenarios. The test is not necessarily just here's an idea and spit it back. It does really require you to sort of put together concepts and think through them in scenarios. And the other, thanks, Bill. And the other thing I would say is make sure to take the practice, the readiness quizzes. There are 2 now.
Oh yeah.
On the sites. They will give you what the exam sort of feels like.
Yeah, I think they're structured just like the exam. The exam has 150 questions. The quizzes together, I think collectively have like 33 or 4 or 5, something like that. I personally, I don't learn by taking practice quizzes, but I know people want to test their skills. There are some people who like to take multiple things over and over and over again. But if you pass both of those quizzes with flying colors, you are more than ready to sit for the exam, right? If you get 35% of the questions right, you probably want to go back and continue your studies there. Okay?
It's not the same questions on the test.
They are not the
It's
same
a practice.
And
But it's a useful, to me,
Yeah.
a useful
It is.
way to understand the kinds of questions that you will get, the structure of questions.
And the answers are not provided when you finish the quiz.
No.
So if you miss them, you're still going to have to go and look up your answers.
Right. Because then the tendency would be just to go get the answers and pass the quiz easily and then think you're ready and then go and take the exam and not do so well, right? So that is the thing. The exam does get updated periodically. This year, it will sync back up to version 12 of the BizBox. There's at least a quarter between when, and there's work involved in doing that, right? But there are updates to the exam. One of the examples of an update is a question that used to be hard 6 years ago is no longer hard. And everybody has gotten it right out of the last 250 exams that have been taken. So there's a detailed statistical analysis that's done on the exam periodically.
Yeah.
And so just to keep that in mind.
By psychometricians who are exam,
Professional
Professionals.
psychometricians, yeah.
not us.
there
We're
is
not
a-
doing this.
There's a professional exam writer that gets involved. So there, and all the questions are A, B, C, D. There's no none of the above. There's no all the above. Those are actually unfair. And there's no tricks, right?
What are the best resources on the Guild website for starting up a business architecture practice?
Well, I would also look in the bid box itself. If there's a section on getting started and some things on business architecture teams, so I wouldn't just limit to website things. Honestly, it's a great idea to go look at the business architecture maturity model, the BAM, which you can download in the store, because that gives you the categories of a practice and what mature looks like over time. So you can sort of aspire to where you're going and where you're going next.
Yeah, that definitely gives you all the parts and pieces you want to hit on. And you can't do them all right away. So you have to think about what you want to prioritize. And not everybody's priorities by any means are the same, right? Some people want to use it for product mapping. Some people want to use it for other types of things, right? So you do have to make your priorities. But in terms of, yeah, the BizBox, the first couple of sections of part 3 have some good stuff in it. I'm trying to remember what white papers are out there on that topic. But by the way, all of these decks from every summit are posted on the Guild site. So you can find not just these decks, but you can go back over past decks. I think that there's some plan going forward, Ruth, to categorize those in a
Yes,
more readily available way.
yes. There's going to be a new piece of the platform that will
Yes.
generate all of our content in a different way.
Yes, so it's
It's
going to get
coming soon.
a lot easier to find things. There's also some case studies that are also posted out there, and you can take a look at those as well.
I was going to point to that too, right? The case studies, the tales from the front, because the first step in starting your practice is to decide the value proposition for your organization. So
All the
start
time.
there, get inspired. And also part 1 of the BizBot guide is freely available. So that's the overview. By all means, make sure you've read that and have the overview.
Start small, some opportunity to deliver value and things we typically organization about 2 years to improve one level of maturity. You know, so if you're starting at level 0 now, don't expect to be at level 5 next year.
And if somebody says they want to work with you, never, ever, ever walk away from that person. Okay. We have seen people we sat there in one meeting and knew that the team was doomed when they walked away from a customer experience team and wanted to work with them. Right. On the way to the airport, we knew that this team did not have long to survive, and they were gone. So don't do that. Yeah. I heard somebody say, oh my God.
Mike Rosen, here's one for you. Quick tips to improve stakeholder engagement. I made it for you.
Tips to improve stakeholder engagement. That's supposed to be an easy question.
I made that one for you.
Okay, all right. Well, first is to understand who your stakeholder is, right? And I always say that, you know, we're as architects, our job is to help make better decisions. So we have to understand who is making the kind of decision that we have the opportunity to hopefully align with our company's strategic visions. And then hopefully we can work with that stakeholder, understand how they make that decision. What kind of information and artifact would be useful for that person with their skill set and their perspective at that time that they're making the decision that would help them use it, want to use it, and help them make a better decision. You know, I say that if you don't know who's going to use what you're producing, for what purpose and how, you don't know those three things before you produce it, it won't be used. So to improve stakeholder engagement is to ask that person those three questions and work with them to create something that's useful for them.
Wendy, can you mention something about how we're progressing in the world of academia? A topic was presented last year. Is there any take-up?
Great question. So, indeed, so for those of you who are not as familiar, the Guild does have an academic program with the goal to really get business architecture into university. But there's also a two-way street there, right? So we also want to get feedback and we do that. So we have a number of universities in the program. And you know, so we have some nice two-way street going. For example, Frankfurt University just did a briefing on, you know, one of the projects that the students did. And so we have that sort of exchange. I will say it's maybe not too small, but notable. So for those of you that remember that MBA roundtable Guild study that showed that gap in strategy execution, we saw this year the MBA roundtable recommended now top of their list for their new strategy course resources, strategy execution. So they recommended a new reading on it. Is it perfectly Guild or business architecture aligned? Absolutely not. But the point is, right, we're making bits of inroads around the world.
A question about where to locate value mapping templates and other templates presented during the last few days.
Okay, I'll grab that one. So the templates that are used in the BizBoc, which most of the sections have templates, are available in Excel format under the Guild Member Resources page, pull down. If you just go to the Member Resources page, scroll down, you'll find a template. I think it's 8.0 version, and you will see all the templates. Periodically, we add templates to those. They change rarely because the vendors actually can import those templates. So we try not to change them very much. Those same templates are what the reference models are delivered in. So it's the exact same format as the reference models. It's just that there's a lot more templates in the template library than there are than you would see in the reference models, because some of those templates are pretty, I would guess, personalized to your organization, like strategy cross mappings and things like that. So there's not necessarily all of those in the reference models, but the full set of templates are available in Excel spreadsheet format.
A while back, there was a presentation about standards.
Yeah.
Is it still ongoing? Any high level update?
Yeah, we didn't get into that too much this morning. The business architecture core meta model is the standard at the OMG, which is where we are now, that is going through what's called a finalization task force. It was passed about a year ago by the architecture board. If I don't want to get into too much of the nuances of standards management, because it's kind of boring, but the architecture board passed it. At that point, it goes into a finalization. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of input from people. Those inputs are being incorporated into it. The hope is that the finalization task force will complete it and it will pass the architecture, and I think the architecture board again in September or in June this year, June of 2023. And at that point, if it does pass, then it's just a packaging for release and a final vote by the OMG board of directors. That would happen probably over the third and fourth quarter. That means that I think, if I understand it right, the soonest it would be available publicly would be at the end of the calendar year 2023. However, there is a beta version out there you can get to. I think you can just Google Business Architecture Core Meta Model, OMG, and you'll stumble into the beta version. It has changed, but it hasn't changed that dramatically. So you can see what's out there, and especially for the vendors, if you want to get access to it, that's out there. All the little XMI and all the details aren't in there, but those are in there.
And Bill, for those that maybe aren't as familiar with this is pretty historical. This is a big deal. Can you talk to this? So what? What does
Yeah.
it mean?
So years and years ago, there was disagreement on what a business architecture was. The Guild has taken big steps to try to address that. The Guild has its own meta model. That meta model was the basis for the Guilds and its partners. Some of the vendors went in with the Guild to submit for the standard update. However, there were 3 standardization teams, each of which had multiple vendors and organizations in it. Those 3 teams were told to go away and come back with a shared common standard. That took like 2.5, 3 years. Thank you. 3 years, because basically the other teams wanted to start over from scratch. So over a period of time, they worked through what's a capability, what's a value stream. Interestingly, the end product looks a whole lot like the Guild meta model. It's just positioned differently, right? I think the word customer stakeholder is split across customer in one case and resource in another. It's a little confusing, but the meta model team at the Guild is working on a white paper so you can sort that out and figure it out. So if you're using the BACM is an implementable model. It can be implemented pretty much by any vendor who wants to implement it. And the so what, just to keep going, if you have multiple tools, they will be able to do interchanges. So if my model in my group is in Sparks, your model is in, I'll pick one who's not here today. The IRIS business, IRIS, not ARIS, IRIS business architect. We can pass the models back and forth. We're hoping in the fall of 2024 to do a BA vendor-thon to demonstrate how the model, how complete Guild models or close to complete Guild models can be exchanged from tool to tool to tool to tool. That means if you decide to get rid of a tool and bring in a new tool, as long as both vendors share the interchange format, you can import and export from one tool to the other. That's the big so what, right? The other one is if I've got multiple tools. The third so what is, that means that the vendors actually know what business architecture is. If somebody comes in and you're looking at tools and they don't align to either the Guild meta model or to the BACM, you got to ask yourselves, how much energy and time am I going to put into trying to customize this tool if I can to try to make it work? Or should I just go get a tool, and there'll be more and more of them over time? Should I just go get a tool that actually I can use right away off the shelf for business architecture work? So that's the whole thing. One more other sort of wishful thing that is coming down that we're going to try to look at. I'm sorry for going into this, but I think it's important. Is the other, so OMG is split into 2 groups. One's the technical side, the other one's platform. The technical side has a task force called the Architecture Driven Modernization Task Force, and they're going to try to put together, I say try because everything's hard here, to put together a standard to do an interface between the technical standards at OMG and the BACM, so that we can then have one standard for tool vendors to connect your applications and your data and your technology to the business architecture. That is at the beginning of the conversation. And that is a different task force, which I happen to co-chair. But we'll see where that goes. I do have somebody that I'm going to draft into that effort named Jason. Not you guys. Mike's days of working with OMG are long behind him. But I do have somebody in mind that I would like to, somebody younger with a lot of energy and a lot of smarts. So anyway, that is the whole standard story. And I don't want to talk about open groups, so we'll skip that. Unless somebody has a specific question. There's no easy answer. I'm sorry that it's just, I had to explain it. So go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Mike or Ruth.
Is there a targeted date for version 12 of the BizBox? And can you share a little bit about what will be updated?
The target date for the annual BizBox release, which is the only deadline that people have, the teams have. The Guild has no other deadlines other than that. Is the end of March, beginning of April. I got a note today that it's not quite ready for the build. They do a build because there's like 55 sections that have to get, and there's an automatic build for it that creates the PDF. I don't know why it's not ready, because as far as I'm concerned, everything's done. But the editorial board, the editor and the chair of the editorial board said that the bill, it's not ready for the bills. I'll send them a note tomorrow. Normally it would be out April 1. Last year it got delayed because of some weird things going on with the, some of the images. And the editorial board wanted to hold it up because of that, but, it should be out in no later than the first half of April. I can't even imagine any reason for why it would be delayed. So first part of April. I have something I want to share that I heard this week. Oh, we got a question coming up. When we're out of questions, I will share something I heard from multiple people this week. I want to bring back.
All right, so I have a question about a lot of IT organizations or functions are moving towards kind of persistent teams aligned to what they might call a digital product or a service or a solution. And I'm just curious, do you have any thoughts on a relationship between business architecture and what they're deeming as a digital product or solution or service? And then how can business architecture support or interact with that mentality?
Yeah, the basic mapping, regardless of what the technology does, and I encourage everybody to go down this path, is between the capability. There's other pieces, right? It depends how tangled up your architecture is. But basically the capability and the software. The capabilities should ideally be implemented in the software. The unfortunate part is that most capabilities that are automated, and not all are, and maybe not all should be, but most of them are automated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds or thousands and thousands of times over and over and over again. There is a mapping that you can create for that. Now, what you're going to do with your digital product, are these internal service exchanges or?
So you might have like 5 related applications that are all owned by a digital product manager per se. So like a grouping or a family of digital things, right? And it's more of a team structure and management concept around the digital operating model. But I'm just curious, how business architecture and that kind of mentality at the
So in the bigger picture, and this is in the back of this is in BizBox 6.0. Well, I say 6, part 6 has 8 sections, right? That's all the technical stuff. So there is a model that maps the not just capability, but also business unit and value stream. And that gives you additional context on where the technology is being used and how it's being used. So it's actually a 3-way mapping to the technology. It's a messy job to map to applications. A number of the vendors already support it in their tools today, but the model for that is in the back of the BizBox. And then there's several sections that go into a little more detail on it, but the basic mapping to that is inside the back of the BizBox, the cross mapping model. Okay, so you can incorporate the business unit in there as well.
I find a lot of digital product or a lot of product teams, whether they're digital or not, roughly align with the SAFE model. And so if you think about SAFE, you're driven by value streams, but SAFE value streams are very informal. So if you use an actual business architecture value stream, you have a lot more formality in making sure they're all consistent, that they make sense, whatever, and they align to capabilities. So then what we see is that if you've got a good capability model map, that in general, again, my experience, level 3 capabilities almost always map to product features in your continuous cycles, and as well to architectural enabler features that let your intentional architecture be a couple steps ahead. So if you have a good value stream and capability model, you can really influence the correct or a better, more prioritized, dependency enabled, all of that selection of stories that are going to turn into features and enablers.
And just to add a tiny bit more, kind of reiterating a little bit, but you know, the key is in the word product and what is a product. And when we've talked about products in the BizBot guide, and when you see it in the ecosystem, that is a product or service that is delivered to an end customer, not an internal one or a constituent, right? If you're government or nonprofit, which means, as Bill was saying, we have capabilities, automate the real products and services, and the system, or sorry, capabilities enable the real products and services. And then it's the systems that automate those capabilities. So I think it's more important than ever before that we bring that real product perspective to the table and do overlays so that we can help make sure our organizations are really focused on the North Star, which is the customer or constituent.
Most of the presenters we've heard from are from huge organizations. Do you have a sense of the size an organization should be in order to benefit from business architecture? Or do you think any organization can?
From 0 to 300.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that?
Yeah, from 0. Oh, well, from 1 to 300,000 or more.
Yeah, I mean, business architecture applies any size and any type of organization. We do see this in practice. We may not have heard from all of them in the summit, but we've seen startups, we've seen sole proprietors, we've seen cross-sector, not even an organization, but more of an ecosystem. And I think one of the takeaways that we took from the startup one was, you know, if you leverage these concepts now, you're going to head off the big company problems that you could have later.
And I'll just say, other than jokingly aside, I mean, even a startup, small companies can benefit from some level of thinking and planning, and architectural rigor adds to that. Again, my experience is if your organization has a development structure in the 20 to 50 to 100 size, 200, your opportunity to actually influence the way that organization works and what they do and how, and your opportunity to be successful early on in an architectural effort is really much higher. There's so much less organizational inertia in small organizations that people are open to new ideas that you can show them delivers value.
What would you recommend the level of capabilities and initiative mapping?
All of them. I mean, you can't play favorites with levels, right? If it's a small thing that you're going in to fix, maybe it's like some level 4 capability. It's not working well, right? So if you really play this out and use it, I heard somebody say that business architecture should just be used for strategic things. That's not true. It can be used for small changes, right? So if you really play this out, you would say, this thing is changing in my business. It affects the behavior of this particular level 4 capability. We should go in and fix that. Maybe it's like product risk rating level or something like that, or something along those lines, something down pretty low. You have to go in and address that capability. You go in and address that capability, and you map it to a small project that you're going to do. Then you do it, and then you can tie it to that project. You should be updating your capability map anyway to reflect these things, and you get done and you move forward. So that obviously is a more mature business architecture team. That is not a startup team, but there's no restrictions on using it for small efforts or for larger ones. Would you guys add to that or thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, especially in this space, capability to initiative mapping is very scenario based, right? In terms of what scope of those mappings are you going to do, and to what level of detail. You gave a good example of maybe framing up an initiative, but if we're looking at portfolio spend, now you're maybe looking at whatever your business case or whatever your initiative submissions are against a level 2 or 3 capability at the high level. Right?
Mike,
Just
you and I
because-
worked at a financial company that had multiple risk ratings, and they were, somebody went to get a loan from one group and got turned down. They went to another group and got the loan. And so because there was no consistency in the risk rating, so they wanted to get a standardized risk rating engine, but nobody knew what they were talking about. But the business architecture team sort of came into the rescue and explained the logic behind it and the pictures and blueprints behind that, right? So that's when you can actually explain it, because we had this guy we were working with is running around yelling about a risk engine. Nobody knew what he was talking about. It's like, why does he want this thing? Why is he going to shove this down these people's throats, right? It's like, but it was a perfectly logical thing that somebody needed. It was just that it wasn't communicated very well. So the business architects could come in and with their, blueprints and skills, explain, this is a logical thing that you guys should do. This makes perfect sense, right? But it sort of takes this abstract sort of arm waving thing and puts it into a reality everybody can sort of buy into and understand. I have something I kept hearing this week. What happens if I have one of two things? There's an A and a B. I have vendors come in and my management keeps hiring these vendors, or these vendors kept getting brought in from different parts of the company. And every one of them brings in a capability map, not just a capability map, but let's start there. And they're walking in with a capability map. And because you guys know business architecture, you're sitting there going, there's not a capability map. It's not even remotely a capability map, but these vendors are walking in the door and because they got hired by a VP, right? So how do you deal with that, right? And then the part B of that is you've got multiple parallel mapping exercises going on in different parts of the company. And somebody is sitting and gone off and built their own capability map. So the step one on it is sort of straightforward. Your goal is everybody's going to use your business architecture, right? That's your goal. Cut that 60 days of work off the front end of the project, save your company some money, and tell them this is the capability map and value streams and information maps. And you're going to use all that. And it's if it's mature, great, it's cross mapped and so forth. So that's what you want to do. That's your goal. But when they're saying, why is yours better than mine? I'm sure some of you have heard that. The question you want to ask is, what principles have you used to formulate, and it's not just capabilities, but to formulate those capabilities, to differentiate one from the other, to say that this one is a capability and this one's a capability, but this one overlaps with these capabilities, so it can't be in there, right? So you have to, you're creating non-redundant, consistent, decomposable capabilities. What principles did they use? You can share your principles with them, right? You show them, bang, bing, 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 bing. This is object-based, it's non-redundant, etc. Right? You decompose to the next level. You don't, there shouldn't be any child capabilities working with another object because that's not what they're supposed to do. What principles did they use in forming their mapping? Sit there and wait for an answer. With not just these sort of faux capability maps, but with many other things that people walk in the door with, there's no principles. There's nothing that says this is one of these things and this is not one of these things, or this is the same as this thing and that is different from this thing. You will find that we found that in mapping to customer experiences. We found that in mapping to quote unquote high level processes, quote unquote. We found that in looking at APQC, right? We found that in looking at these sort of one-off models that people walk in with, or, the pretty PowerPoint deck. Somebody said, well, the PowerPoint decks are so beautiful. Well, I get that, but if they're really fancy PowerPoint decks, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's value there, right? So get your practice stood up, get some maturity, get the reference models, and challenge them. So yeah, there's a question behind you, Ruth.
I was just going to add, because
yeah,
I don't always find that people give a shit about the principles. I mean, just to be rude. So, that's maybe that might be a little bit too abstract for the executive who just played golf with the vendor, right? So the meta model and the principles and the structure of capabilities in the BizBoc are cross-mapped to everything else in the universe. And the thing that's beautiful about a BizBoc capability and its abstraction is that you can go from any one thing to any other thing. And generally there's a problem that you're trying to solve that's going to require that kind of mapping that their capability model will not be able to do. So if you dig into some of these different cross mappings, you'll be able to show that what they have, which is a little bit less structured on a firm business architecture meta model, is not actually going to be able to solve the problem. One of the sort of common problems is, I've got the same capability instance. I got an capability with multiple capability instances in multiple different organizations that, are implemented by 3 different processes and 5 different kinds of information on 7 different applications. And very, very often their model cannot illustrate that problem.
And that is why principles matter. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
I'm not telling you,
let me give a human take on this, which is a little bit different, right? So I believe that end-to-end strategy execution in business architecture is a muscle and capability that our organizations need, right? So vendors undermining this can be some of the most detrimental things. So I think if you're just getting traction, it starts with partnership and education. And that is partnership with the business people and the executives that are bringing these vendors in, helping them understand the why this is important, what we're trying to build, what this does for our organization in the bigger picture, so that the business people are educated. And then it's sitting down with and partnering and, educating the vendors. Here's what we're trying to do. Help us. If you have an idea, we'd like your feedback, but please use this, test this, right? So you're partnering with them. And then as you gain, more traction over time, I've seen organizations, they put it in the RFP. You're going to use our business architecture. Great. We'll be happy to take your suggestions. Here's the clear role, set clear roles, but put some teeth in it. They need to play by your rules.
Yeah, if you're not involved in writing those RFPs, you need to write the RFPs. Go ahead.
I don't want to stress this topic too much, but from the beginning of our practice, the topic of capability was always a big discussion. So what is a business capability? What is a solution capability? What is a technical capability? And I recently had discussions with an ERP vendor who came to us and said, okay, we have some capabilities here. We want to match and make a target picture with you. And I found out that these are not business capabilities, but solution capabilities. And so they said, yeah, okay, we are technical people. We keep it as solution capabilities. And I said, okay, then fine. I will try to map your solution capabilities to our business capabilities. And then another consultancy came in and they said, oh, we have these capabilities here after data architecture practice. And then they said, okay, these are technical capabilities. And I said, okay, fine. I keep these and I will try to map these to our business capabilities. But I have the feeling this is the road to doom, or what should I do there?
The elegance of simplicity is fading there. You can have lots of, and I understand that you have to do what you have to do. But so that's understandable, but you want to keep it simple. The more stuff you add in, the more complex it gets, right? It's like cross-mapping values, business architecture value streams to safe value streams, right? That's a whole layer there of complexity you don't need. And it's just gonna, and then it's just an architect's dream of being able to work on models forever and not get anything done. And that's not good either, right?
Some of those models just lend to mapping many capabilities, and it's just too much.
Yeah.
What to do with functions? How do you incorporate them in the meta model? Could you consider them as accountable of their core capabilities?
They have no place in the meta model. Absolutely none. And have them explain what principles they use to form a function and how it's different from a capability. I mean, because a lot of times they end up with features, right? That they tend to, and products have features, right? So you end up with features but they call them functions. Or I've seen people trying to manage these giant function maps, cross map to the capability maps. And I didn't see a function in there that couldn't be interpreted as a capability and just get rid of the function map. It's just a whole nother layer. The reason, by the way, it's still in the TOGAF 10 content model is because it was too political to remove because it's been in there so long. So the business architecture work stream tried to get rid of it, but they faced political backlash from the vendors who have that built into their models and use it. So it's a lot of sort of that stuff going on.
And so Go ahead.
You go.
I was going to say so there's business units, right? If you want to tie a capability to a specific department, we know that. But we found that functions are often grouping of capabilities, right? But
Yeah.
so, the key really comes into view. I think it was Henrik maybe that had today, he didn't have a view of functions on one of his slides. That's what it brings together. But it's the elegance is why it's not.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't show capability maps to executives. Most executives would throw at least me out. If you walked in with a capability map, it's like, if you want to have conversations, use your value streams or use anything, but don't use those.
If you've drunk the Zachman Kool-Aid, then you know the difference between a primitive and a composite. And functions are almost always composites. So if you have to work with a function, you can do a little analysis and then break it down into whatever primitives. I usually find a function is a capability with an organizational structure and a location. But whatever it is, you can break it down and then you can map it to real business architecture.
The big thing is not to go mapping crazy and all of a sudden you forgot about the people you're trying to serve as a business architect. And all of a sudden there's no value. And these guys have been locked in some room for 9 months arguing about stuff. And people are going, what does that team do? I don't know. But they haven't done anything lately, right? So don't do that. I have one that I'm not sure if people want to comment on. Pushback from solution architects and software service designers about using capabilities. This is at the other end of execution, right? Way down there, using capabilities. And I have had, senior software service designers and architects say, business architecture is just a lot of hand waving, right? It's a lot of hand waving. And then go off and explain how this is a service and here's how you decompose it and, read this part of my book. And it's like, well, capabilities already cover what you do. They're already decomposed, right? Or you can decompose them more, right? And you get pushback because they've been always doing it this way, right? Now, I'm not saying everybody's, maybe you're welcomed in with both arms and it's your best friend and you work with these solution architects and it's a kumbaya moment and that's all great. But I'm also saying that if you haven't experienced any of that pushback from solution architects or software service designers or developers, it is possible that you may run into that. And I don't know if you bumped into any of that in your travels.
I don't run into it too much. We usually try to do the framing of, wouldn't it be useful to understand the bigger picture that you're actually designing the solution within? I usually position it that way.
Yeah.
I guess I say sometimes run into it in two scenarios. One where you actually have a crappy capability map,
That would be bad.
which exists, right? And another where the software service is not well defined to be unique enough. And so you're trying to create an API for a software service, which somehow seems to map to multiple half of two different capabilities or something like that. And that's probably an indication that you got your capability model wrong, or you got your service model wrong. And so then what do? You take that opportunity to re-examine both of those things and figure out what's right and not create the wrong thing at the wrong, at the wrong time.
Assuming all of you folks will have really, really, really good capability maps, which I'm just going to assume that now because you've been here. So let's say assume you're right, because you can try it out. But you're going to run into things like domain-driven design. Capabilities fit perfectly well in there as a domain, right? But you have to make that adjustment in Mike said earlier, I'll paraphrase, know your audience, right? When you're talking to these folks, right? First of all, don't get them mad, but explain how domain-driven design can leverage capabilities and how that is an opportunity for them to really focus on building more software more quickly, as opposed to trying to figure out what the business does because they don't know, but they're going to go figure it out by, playing combination of analyst and all the other kinds of things out there.
Usually a relatively small set of common scenarios that go wrong when you have this conflict. And so again, if you have a, you know, a little playbook in your head, you know, most often if there's a misalignment, it's gonna result in some kind of tight coupling that you don't want. And so if you can illustrate the tight coupling as a result of this mismatch, you know, then you won the argument. So so again, you know, think about the problems that occur when that mismatch exists, and search for those problems in the solution, and then you can identify the issues.
But, and find allies that you can work with that can sell the story for you.
Here usually works too. So
Believe me, if I'm sitting in a room with a solution architect explaining business architecture to people, why it's important, and I just don't have to say anything, that's the most wonderful thing in the whole world. And I've been lucky enough to be sitting there, you know, a little bit almost aghast. It's like, well, this is good stuff. It's like, maybe this will happen every time I go to a meeting. That's good.
software developers, pizza and beer, architects, whiskey.
Yeah, yeah. It's like all things. Good messaging this week, by the way, on partnering and working with your colleagues. Really good stories. That's all I had. Okay.
Thank you. Amazing.